Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. It's Committee of the Whole, Champaign County Board for Finance, Policy, Personnel Appointments, Justice, and Social Services. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Harper. Hartke. King. Marsh.
Here.
McGuire. Michaels. Mitchell. Patterson. Petrie. Rector. Rosales. Summers. Tinsley. Anderson. Clemens. Cowart. Cruz. Esri.
Here.
Furtado. Goss.
Here.
Weibel.
Present. We have a quorum. I think we'll have a few more Democrats come in slowly. Seek approval of the agenda and then the addenda. Moved by Esri, second by Goss. Discussion. Thank you. See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Seek approval of the minutes of September 12th, 2017. Moved by Mr. Harper, second by Mr. King. Discussion on the minutes. Ms. Michaels.
Just real quick, if you would go back through the roll call
We'll
on
catch
that,
up,
I
we'll
think
catch up on that.
Okay,
let's
but
move
that has to do with the minutes, sir.
the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry.
They eliminated some of the people that answered the roll call question. They have them marked as present, but then they do not have them marked in the roll call section. It's just a little blurb. Probably just an accident.
So the question is that confusing though? The members were present, so that's okay.
Right, but then it has the roll call, and in the roll call, it skips several people that actually were present.
It says Mitchell entered the meeting there.
Yeah,
Well,
but King, Rector, Patterson, Tinsley, and myself.
so there's no record of you entering the meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Or any of those other people other than
What I
Mitchell.
suggest that we modify that so that, who's the list of people that aren't noticed? Everybody except, so it's King, Michaels, Patterson, Rector, and Tinsley entered the meeting later.
No, sir, we were here when the meeting
Oh.
was first called to order.
Ah, well, that's different then.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Just to go back to the record and check, and I'm
Okay.
happy with however that goes.
Then I would ask that we defer to correct these minutes until the county board meeting.
Correct.
Is there any objection? Kay, do you see what the problem is?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
talk to Tammy about it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry, I misunderstood you there. Okay, let's move on to public participation. First is Katie Blakeman.
Good evening. I'm Katie Blakeman, Champaign County Circuit Clerk, and also resident of the city of Champaign. I'm here tonight just to give you a quick update on how Champaign County's first Amnesty Week went last week. I think I came to County Board not too long ago telling you about how we were planning to hold an Amnesty Week, and that event was to provide an opportunity for those who have outstanding or past due fines and fees on criminal and traffic cases. And we held that Amnesty Week all week last week. We had extended hours for the week so that people could come in at a more convenient time. We opened every day at 7:30 a.m. And then Monday, Thursday, Friday, we stayed open until 5 p.m. rather than 4:30. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, we stayed open until 6:30. So we had extended hours all week long and lots of opportunities for people to come in. So I wanted to share with you some of those results. We're still not at final numbers because we are accepting still any payments that come in that were postmarked by last Friday. So we did still receive a few today, and I imagine we'll have a couple trickling in throughout the week. So as a reminder, this program was to allow for the waiver of collection fees and the county late fees. So the total of number of cases that came in last week were 166 cases. Of those, 143 of those customers, we were able to provide them immediately with compliance paperwork, which is the paperwork they would need to prove to the Secretary of State's office that they have cleared any old debt on traffic cases or DUIs. And so those individuals were then able to take that paperwork immediately to go get a driver's license if it had been suspended or revoked. They still had to follow the process at the Secretary of State's office, but we were able to provide compliance paperwork immediately. The total amount of money so far, as I said, we still have a few payments coming in, was just about $117,000. Now, we don't know exactly how much of that yet with the distribution, how much of that is county, and how much of that goes to other agencies, including the state, but we'll know more about that at month end after we process our month end and cut checks for distribution. But we would consider that to be definitely a success. I did talk to the new Lake County Circuit Clerk, who they held in Lake County, which, as you know, is a much larger community. They held an Amnesty Week not too long ago, and they ended up with around the same numbers in total amount. So I think we did a great job in advertising the event, and we were just really pleased with the response. I did want to say just a quick addition that I was really proud of my staff. We had lots of anxious, really enthusiastic volunteers to work the extra hours, but we had staff members say to us that it was so much fun because it's not often that we get to do something really positive and fun in the courthouse. So staff was really enjoying it and really enjoying the opportunity to be able to clear up cases for people and get them to be able to move forward. So I just wanted to share those numbers with you. We did estimate that the customers who made payments last week saved about $35,000 and what they would have otherwise had to pay in collection and late fees. So those are the preliminary numbers, and we'll give you a more detailed update at the end of the month. So thank you. And I do really appreciate the county board's support of this event.
Ms. Petrie, we don't allow communications with.
I think congratulations is in order to her.
All right, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Petrie.
Ms. Dottie Vera Weiss.
Hi, good evening. I want to add my congratulations to what Katie has reported. And I think it's really important also to notice these people who now now will be able to get driver's licenses. They're not going to get arrested and maybe be in jail for not having a driver's license. And unfortunately, if you look at the jail bookings, there's a lot of people who go into jail for that very reason. I wanted to thank all of you for the fact that you spend 2 or 3 or 4 evenings a month here. And I know that that's a lot of time, and there may be a bunch of other time involved as well, and I do appreciate that. And I know that you do it because the purpose in serving here is to make this a better county to live and work in. I usually just give you a bunch of facts and stuff. Tonight, I'm also saying that it's been really hard watching the devastation of the California wildfires. I lived in California for 30 years or more. I know those places. I know people who live in those places who've had to evacuate in many cases. As far as I know, none of my friends and acquaintances have been physically injured, but I know that that is happening. And I realized that I feel the same way looking at that kind of devastation as I do when I hear somebody talk about the impact on them of having a family member in jail, about the missing parent, about the difficulty making phone calls or making visits there. And I want to be sure that Champaign County is not doing supporting policies and procedures that contribute to people spending more time in jail. And I know you can say that, well, then the parent or the family member shouldn't have done whatever they did anyhow. But right now, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that in our jail, 85% of the people have not been convicted and therefore are legally innocent. Innocent of a crime unless they plead guilty or unless they are convicted by a judge or jury. And Supreme Court case, the Salerno case in 1987, said that you can't keep somebody in jail if they have not been convicted unless there is an overwhelming reason that they need to be there and that it can't be met by a less restrictive measure. And I don't think that that's the case for most of the people that are in jail. There are other ways to deal with that. So then I looked at the wording of the public safety sales tax referendum that was passed back in 1998. It had failed in 1997. But the wording of the referendum was that people approved the tax to be used for crime prevention, detention, and other public safety purposes. Notice that the first thing is crime prevention. And then if you look at the statute that defines it a little bit more, it says public safety purposes means crime prevention, detention, firefighting, police, medical, ambulance, or other emergency services. Notice it doesn't say to pay the electric bill for the courts, because the courts are not part of the emergency services. Later in that statute, it does also say, for purposes of this section, public safety includes but is not limited to these same things, the crime prevention, detention, firefighting, police, medical, ambulance, or other emergency services. But the initial one and what the voters were voting on was putting crime prevention first. And this county has only been putting 5% of the public safety sales tax towards prevention. It was recommended by ILPP and by the Community Justice Task Force that the amount that would be used for crime prevention and alternative kinds of services of sentences be community service and restorative justice practices and things like that. That the portion for that be increased from 5% to 30%. And that sounds like a very reasonable goal in terms of the way that was worded. Also in August, I don't know if how many of you were at the facilities meeting, but Sheriff Walsh was asked, what are the ways that you could decrease the number of people in jail? And he mentioned or was asked about a pretrial services program. And he said, well, yes, a pretrial services program could make a modest decrease, but it would require a robust pretrial services program. And that means pretrial services programs do an evidence-based evaluation of the risk of somebody being released and their likelihood of not showing up for trial, provides that information to the judge who makes the final determination of whether somebody stays in jail or not. So that's one part of it, and that's the part that I think needs the most robust program. The places that are using pretrial services program find that the vast majority of people don't need anything more than just a reminder of the court dates in order to show up for the court date. And that the important thing about this is that people who are released pretrial, specifically in the first 3 days, ideally the first day, they are much likely to be rearrested, so recidivism rates are lower. And also for those who are convicted and serve time in jail or prison, the recidivism rates after that are also lower. So that is a crime prevention method. The other things were mentioned in the reports of ILPP and Community Justice Task Force, like having mental health services in the community, like having better education programs, homeless services, a lot of other things. They're also important as crime prevention. And so it's been said that a budget is a moral document. The budget that you're considering includes an amount close to about $250,000 for planning for a new jail. And I really think it's important to look at that really carefully about how that's going to be used. But most importantly, I think if you can look at the whole budget in terms of, is this a budget that's going to make this a community, a county, that is a good place to live and to work? I think that that's what you're all trying to do here, and it's important to look at the details on it. Thank you very much.
Next is Nilofer Shambiati.
Good evening. I would like to also talk about this new jail proposal, which has a lot to do with the previous ones, but it has its own specificities. But before doing that, I wanted to ask a question, which is about a one-sheet of information that a few weeks ago I handed out to the members of the county board. And because I used to be a teacher, so when I hand out something to my students, not that you are my students, but I'm just treating you like my students here, I want the paper, I want the response back. I don't know what's the best mechanism, because here at these meetings, we don't have it give and take, right? And we don't have any town hall meeting structures for this kind of give and take to happen. So the only other way that comes to my mind, unless you have a better way, is to have your written statements in response to what I had turned out. And I can send everyone my email address, and I would really appreciate your responses to different pieces of information that is provided. Not all of them comes from me personally, but from like authorities in the criminal justice system, from experts, from researchers, etc. So it's not my own set of information, although my perspectives are reflected there. So that's one request. And now I just want to talk about how having mental health units or detox unit in our jail or jails is very misguided and going to have a very severe, terrible consequences for our entire community. One thing is that it shifts a lot of money from what we need in our communities to keeping people locked up. Whether it's done with a humanitarian kind of viewpoints, and it's very benevolent, it does not really make much of a difference in its outcomes. And the reason I'm so concerned about this in this budget session is that this $261,000 plus dollars that is in the proposed budget would definitely go to planning for jail expansion, in addition to changing the sheriff's office from where it is now to ILEP. I don't know what it is. ILEAP building or L? I don't know. I'm so bad with acronyms. Okay, so that's totally warranted to do that change, that transfer. I mean, we don't want to deprive our officers and our sheriff from a basically decent office space. That's one thing. But the only way that it would not be used for jail expansion is if the downtown jail is not closed. So if we look at the circumstances under which the downtown jail would not be closed, given the prevalent mentality that I see everywhere in our county among the criminal justice system officials, is that that would not happen unless the sheriff's office gets what it wants, which is expanding the jail and also having mental or behavioral treatment facilities within the jail. So I see these two kind of to be contingent upon each other, and since a lot of people in the community would very, very vehemently oppose the extensions of the jail. So what I would see is that does that mean that the downtown jail gonna stay open with all the inhumane features that it has that everyone admits to, right? We all know. I mean, it's really the report that had demanded the county to try to make the county jail ADA appliant, and also talked about how even if if a person is has the full mental capacity, by being in that environment will get sick. I mean, that was what those people were saying. So we don't want that happen. We want the downtown jail to be closed no matter what. And so why am I so against this jail extension? There are so many reasons. I guess the previous...
Make it quick, please.
Okay, so what I want to insist upon is that there are a lot of statistics that shows that the same type of treatment in jails and in prisons is much more expensive than in community and is much less effective, which means that when people get out of jail, if there are not good mental health and detox treatment centers in the community, then they would revert back to their past situations. If they don't have enough medication, if they don't have counseling, if they don't have access to various kind of psychiatric treatments, then it's going to be like a total waste of time for these people to actually get that treatment in jail, which is extremely expensive. And
Your time is up.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say they can be offered the same, much better services in community with less expenses, with much better results, with less recidivism rates, everything that you want from your community. So I cannot see that the board would come down on the side of accepting this proposal. Thank you very much.
Is there further public participation? Seeing none, we'll close that. Any communications from the board? Mr. King.
Community events, is that, okay, so there is the CU West African Drum and Dance Collective that takes place this weekend. I think it's called the Midwest Main Dang 2017, and it's happening at Cranard Performing Arts, and it'll be a Friday to Sunday event with various events, and I could offer the website later for folks to go to, if that's okay.
All right, thank you. Anything else, board members? Mr. Schneider.
I just wanted to send my congratulations to the Circuit Clerk's Office for their work on the first Amnesty Week program that Champaign County has held. One thing I think that also ought to be reiterated in this is that when we went through the expungement summit last year, which we're planning to host again this year, I believe something like 90% of the persons who were unable to successfully clear their cases through the court it was because of they had not satisfied their obligations related to those fines and fees. So I'm hoping that the results of this week will lead to more success for people for the next summit coming later this month.
Mr. King, you have something else?
I echo Rick's comments about the Amnesty Week. I think that's pretty awesome as well. And I was wondering if this is something that I could get potentially Katie to come back and talk about through the Justice and Social Services component of our.
Certainly, you could ask her.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, let's move on to Justice and Social Services. Mr. King.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chair. So just a few things. Monthly reports are available on each department's webpage, as stated there: Animal Control, Emergency Management, Head Start, Probation, and Court Services, Public Defender, Veterans Assistance Commission, all listed on their respective pages. Nothing for other business on my end. On the Chair's report, I do have just a note of the NACO Creative Counties Placemaking Challenge. That's for information only, and it's just to note that I guess we are in support of the proposal that Lynn's trying to push forward. Thank you.
Lynn, do you want to talk about this at all since you're here? Let's make good use of your time.
It's a long shot and it's not a gigantic prize, but what it would represent for us is an opportunity for this group of, the group is between 20 and 30 artists who have disabilities or behavioral health conditions, and for some of them, the main social event of the year is to come and display and sell their art at our events, and I just think that we can do better. Like, they've come together, and that's so important that now it's time to look for opportunities, even if they're kind of small looking opportunities. This just kind of look fun, like let's go do some workshops and learn more about how they can bring value to the community. So that's all it is. I appreciate support. We can't do it without the county board, and I don't know how much of an obligation this would end up being of someone's time. Would try to keep it as light as possible.
Could you specify exactly what you mean about the county board?
We need somebody, an elected county official, and I thought, what better room of people to ask than this room to be associated with it, and that can be after the fact.
And I am willing to be associated with it. So,
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you.
unless someone else is also willing to be associated, we could have a whole group of associates.
Well, maybe, so this is a long shot. If we don't get this,
Sure.
then we'll do something else.
That sounds great.
Okay.
I just want to point out, I believe that all the expenses would be paid for that county board member, that lucky person, except for food.
Is that it? It's
I think that's what you mentioned, I think, wasn't it?
We'll bring snacks.
Well, or that person, we'll select people on the basis of their diet.
Yes.
Thank you. Go.
Yeah, I have a couple of information questions. Obviously, I support it because I forwarded the announcement.
You
so
did, thank you.
That would be rather unusual not to support this. And the deadline when I forwarded it was very short. So my comments are encouraging comments, not critical comments, because I knew the window of time was really stretching anybody. I would hope, if in fact you have time now, or if in fact this comes to pass for the county and these artists, that we consider engaging the Department of Art and Design. I think it would be a really interesting challenge for that faculty and the students there to get involved and have some capacity to experience the joy and rapture that these people have when they produce things. And do I remember correctly, isn't some of that artwork shown during Ebert Fest?
Yes, That's
That's
right.
the target
That's
time. Okay.
There are two
Oh, there
two
are
big
2
art
times.
shows
All
each
right.
year, yeah. But, those are not necessarily forever.
No, I understand
Right.
that, but just to remind people
Yeah.
that they do have a chance of display in the past.
Yeah.
And I don't remember previously reaching out to the folks in art and design. And one of the people that might respond quite positively and give some guidance to others who in the department is Eric Benson.
Eric Benson?
Yes.
Okay,
He's head of
okay.
department head, yeah.
Thank you. We did have support from the College of Media a couple of years ago. They developed a marketing plan and an online platform for these artists. And just by coincidence, I found out yesterday that we were nominated for an ACE award, and we didn't get it, but that's nice. So I'm happy that Champaign County Arts Council considers us part of this community, so, okay.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. King. Next up, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments, Mr. Rosales.
I pass the gavel on to Pius to make his appointment for the, or reappointment for the St. Joe's Drainage District 4, number 4.
Yes,
term.
term is from October 1 through September 1 through August 31st of 2020. And I nominate Mr. Dwayne Goodwin.
Okay, we've got a first and a second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
I just want to point out the reason we're nominating or have this month is he forgot to send in his paperwork. Go ahead, Bill.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. County Clerk, Gordy, you have anything for us other than the report? I asked for this report to be placed on file, and it's also on the website, correct? Okay, County Administrator, Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 1 is the Administrative Services Monthly Report for September 2017. Without objection, I'd ask that that be placed on file. The next item is our biannual EEO report. What this is a required report. It's also known as the EEO-4, and it monitors our hiring practices and our employee pool. There's an extensive list of information in your packets on this with graphs that have been compiled by my executive assistant, Tammy Asplund. She is here tonight, and she can answer any questions you may have. We also have colored versions of the graphs in your handout in case you don't like the black and white, since it's pretty hard to tell what all the different lines mean without color. So with that, I'll be happy to stand for any questions you may have. Or Tammy, if you have anything. Tammy, you want to come up to the podium for a second here? Ms. Petrie.
Hi, Tammy.
Hello.
You don't have your packets, so maybe I'll refer to this. It wasn't clear to me exactly the reference point for the summary function 16, and function 11. What are these referring to?
Function 11,
On your handout, it's page 2, and function 11 starts at the top of the page, and then it's followed by function 16. The others are titled, so one can figure out what they're applying to, but I don't understand these. Is function 11 criminal justice corrections? Is that?
corrections, yes.
And what's summary function?
That is a summary of several different functions that don't fall into other categories. It includes, let me see here, animal control, emergency management, mental health, highway, planning and zoning, RPC, and sheriff. It's not by department, it's specific functions within each department.
Okay. It probably would be useful to put those in parentheses, so when others read it, they'll have some understanding of what summary function means.
Okay.
And then, as I went through the statistics, I find them illuminating from the perspective that many times the county is, it's indicated that the county doesn't do a very good job in diversity, and these statistics do counter that a bit. So it is good to have this out, and so it'll be in the public domain. Thank you very much for the work.
Certainly.
In general, the graphs show that our employee population mirrors, in general terms, the population of Champaign County. The one area that's an outlier is, of course, the nursing home, where a significant shift both on race and gender. So, any other questions for Tammy? Thank you, Tammy. Great job. Items 3 and 4 are a return of items from the previous month. We had requested approval to send to the Job Content Evaluation Committee 2 positions for evaluation. One was for an HR generalist position, which would involve upgrading the position of executive assistant to the county administrator to an HR generalist. The other was a new position, assistant county administrator for planning and operations. The results of the evaluation are in the yellow handout also. It includes the job descriptions for each position and also the results of the evaluation as far as grade level and salary range. I think that we are concerned about succession planning in the administrative services area. We have 2 persons who are eligible for retirement who both possess significant amount of institutional history, and I am concerned about a transition when those persons leave. There's nothing that's imminent that I'm aware of, but again, both people are eligible to retire at any time, and so I am concerned that we might lose that, and I'd like to prepare or begin preparing for that. Another issue that has arisen since the beginning of my tenure is that I think that there's a lack of capacity in the department in terms of dealing with special issues. Obviously, the nursing home challenges have been a significant consumer of time for me personally, but also other persons on county staff. I think it would be great to have some additional resource, particularly a resource that would have the education and some experience to help the county move forward on some issues. So I see particularly the assistant county administrator position to be helpful if we're going to be dealing with some of these other issues such as capital planning, management of our agendas going forward. One of the things that's a major change in this role from what we currently have within the department in terms of education is that I would like this person to have a master's of public administration if possible. I think we need someone at that level of education and someone who's had at least some time working in a government to be able to provide better assistance to the county. I also know that at this time, and as I've indicated in the memo that's in your packet, that we do have some questions about how the administrative services function may change in the next year or so, depending on how we implement the county executive. So I have provided an alternative recommendation, and that is that I believe we still need the HR generalist position filled to help us deal with those challenges, but we have also had or become aware of the needs within our planning and zoning department. This has been an issue for the last 2 budget cycles that we've talked about, some of the challenges that have arisen through mandatory requirements on the county, particularly the response to the MS4 program requirements. And I believe that if we don't want to move forward at this time on a permanent decision for an assistant county administrator, I would recommend that we provide the additional resource available with the budget savings to Mr. Hall so that he would be able to convert a part-time position in his department to full-time, permanent. MS4 is not going away. We know that the IEPA is going to have additional requirements in terms of enforcement that the county will be expected to fulfill in the coming years, and I think this could also be a good move for the county to strengthen his department's resources. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions of the board.
Patsy, and then King.
I have a number of clarification questions that I would like you to speak to. And Mr. Hall is in the room if he would be willing to elucidate what would be advantageous to his office if a position went from part-time to full-time. To the information questions to you, and that is if the board chose not to approve the assistant to the county administrator at this juncture, at this point in time, but chose to move some of that money, which would not be as much money as compared to creating this whole new position, to Mr. Hall's budget. Does that preclude discussion as we go into the 2019 budget cycle to revisit this potential position? Does it need to be reevaluated, or can we base a later conversation on the evaluation that we're given right now? That's my question to you. And then to Mr. Hall, I'd like to hear what expanding that part-time position to full-time would enable him to do within his office that right now is stretching everybody to get it done.
So in the budget, we've been able to save about $72,000. I think it's $72,808 per year with the 2 headcount that we have not filled. The cost to implement or change the person in the Planning and Zoning Department from a part-time to a full-time position would have an impact of about $23,000 on the general fund and about $31,000 countywide because the fringes are carried in another area. Those funds obviously wouldn't be available for reallocation in the future if we're making this a permanent position. However, we do have the other headcount, which we're not using, and what we would do, we're currently seeking, per direction of the county board chair, or a temporary person to assist our administrative assistant and our executive assistant with some duties. Not everything has been able to have been covered entirely under our normal work hours. So I appreciate the fact that both of those persons have been willing to commit additional time on their part to support administrative services. But I think it's at the point where we need to provide some additional resource for them. However, keeping that as a temporary position that would allow us obviously to make a change if we desire to put in a permanent headcount using those funds. We also have some monies available. There's another part-time position which we may decide to consolidate, and in which case those monies would be available. It's not a huge amount of money, but we're looking at maybe an additional $9,000 or so.
Okay, are you willing to speak to if it's a choice to put off the one to the 2019 budget? Do you see that as just putting it off, or do you see that as a dilatory action?
In speaking with the Strategic Planning Committee, I've raised a number of concerns about our capacity within administrative services, and in fact, the overall operation of county government. I think that we've got, I don't think that we have necessarily the right competencies now that the county is going to need going forward. One example is the information technology function. I think that we need to provide someone who's at a higher level of professional stature in order to guide the county with some of the decisions that are going to be made going forward. Over the next 10 years, we have many millions of dollars that we're going to have to commit to upgrades. The ERP system is the first one, but that'll be followed by upgrades to the tax cycle software. We know that we have some decision making that will be made within MedCAD to deal with their needs for record management services and computer-aided dispatch services. While we won't be footing the entire bill for that, there's a substantial amount of money that will be coming from the county to support that. Down the road, we know that we'll need to upgrade our justice systems, so that's referring to JANO at the courthouse. So all told, there's quite a bit of investment there. Not to mention investments we'll need to make in telephony systems. We currently have a system which we've been notified is going to no longer be supported by the vendor. The vendor's exiting the business, so we're going to need to address that at some point. And there's all sorts of issues related to moving the county out of its older infrastructure, getting off of the mainframe, getting into cloud-based services. That's all going to require, I think, someone with significant vision to develop the roadmap. And our current IT director is actually also eligible for retirement, so I think that he will not be around for the fruition of any plan that might be developed. So I think it's important from a continuity standpoint to do that. I've also indicated my concern about lack of an HR director for the county. I think in an organization with our size of 923 FTEs, that not having a full-time human resources professional is a liability to us. I could go through some instances where we've had problems because I think that persons have not had proper guidance on what policies and statutes are for human resource decisions. So I think that that's another thing that the county needs to address. So there's actually multiple needs out there that I think the county will be discussing going forward, and maybe some of that will be folded into the county executive discussion. But I think it's going to be more than just the dollars that we're talking about for this for FY19.
Okay, and can Mr. Hall come up and give us some evaluation of what he sees?
Well, if this were to happen, this added duties to this position would be more than just MS4. Importantly, it would provide continuity in MS4 because we now just have a part-time person who has been here a little over a year. That person has gained a lot of expertise with our MS4 map, and our office is so small that no one else has any time to work with that map and become familiar with it. So I think it would provide first and foremost continuity in the MS4 program. Because this MS4 position necessarily spends a lot of time outdoors, I would like to use some of these extra hours to reinforce our enforcement and inspections. If you've been reading our monthly reports, you know that we are not inspecting compliance for our permits. We lost that ability when we had to shift all these resources to MS4. So I think putting those back into this position would be make sense because, again, this person is out in the field a lot. We could set up a regular program of once a week doing inspections or as needed. I think we could also reinforce the enforcement program. I don't even want to talk about how far behind we are in that program, even though we are making strides. There's still a long ways to go. And then eventually, the hope is that with this being a full-time position, we could provide cross-training with the current planning so that we could provide, ultimately we would be a much more stable department. When someone goes on vacation, it would be easier for us to provide coverage if something comes up. So this is really significant enhancement for, I think, everything in our department. It is mostly MS4, but the little bit extra, I think, will pay dividends.
Thank you.
There was someone else had a question, I believe, Mr. King?
King?
I think Patsy hit on some of my question. It was sort of a priority And and you can kind of correct me if I viewed this, when you mentioned the human resource specialist, that's the only position out of the group that I actually heard you say that there's a potential liability issue there in relation to the amount of employees. So am I thinking of what might be the most or the priority for you? I don't know if that is accurate based on that comment that you made there. I was trying to figure out which one is a priority.
And of course, some of our priorities have shifted probably even over the last month since I originally approached County Board about these two positions. Absolutely, I feel that the HR generalist is my first priority to address. However, I think at this time, I think that my alternative recommendation, which would be to provide support for planning and zoning, would be my preferred direction if that's the pleasure of the County Board to pursue.
Are there any further questions? Patsy?
Since Robert brought up the issue of liabilities, are there liabilities connected with the work that planning and zoning does?
Well, I think that regulatory compliance is always going to engender some liabilities. Perhaps Mr. Hall has some suggestions on this as to things that we may want to be careful about.
Well, yeah, we have to maintain our MS4 program. We have no choice. The one thing where we do have a choice is when we tell them how quickly we will get things done. And we're making good progress on the storm sewer system map. I think we're going to meet our deadlines with the EPA on that. We're finding, in fact, that when we do that storm sewer system map, there's some things that we can actually help the highway department with, some information they need about their highway network that they're being asked by IDOT to do. And so just recently talking with Jeff, we found out, hey, we can provide that for you while we're doing the storm sewer system map. But again, MS4 requirements are only going to get stiffer as time goes on. In the next few years, we have some new requirements that, maybe working with the cities, we'll be able to meet all of those regulatory requirements. That remains to be seen.
Again, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Esri.
Yeah, I guess if we're looking to kind of give guidance, I guess you could say, since this is just a committee of the whole, I guess I can do this in one motion. I would move to approve, based on what I've heard tonight, move to approve the HR generalist position, but then also move to, I guess, the alternative action, which would allow Mr. Hall to convert his part-time person at planning and zoning to full-time. So that would be my motion.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Pius.
I think, first of all, there's two requests for approval, so we should vote on both of them individually.
Okay.
But also, the alternative of providing money to planning and zoning is not on the agenda. I think it'd be a violation of the Open Meetings Act, but we can do, we can direct, sorry, Ms. Petrie? The memo is not part of the agenda.
I hear you.
The agenda is the blue part of the
I hear you.
item. And believe me, I've gone through the states through that many times. It doesn't matter what's in the supporting stuff. It's on the agenda. It says nothing about planning and zoning. We can direct our administrator to prepare that for the next meeting, though. And also, so at this point, stage, we should just either approve or disapprove these jobs, and then actually in finance, we should ask him to prepare for funding planning and zoning, because that's really a funding issue. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Yeah.
So am I to understand then that we should move to approve item 4, which is,
Well, we beat him.
3 first. Vote on 3 first.
Or if no one, yeah, if I'm understanding Pius right, and I understand what you're saying, I guess if no one would move 3, then it would just die, is what you're saying.
I would suggest make a motion. If nobody seconds it, it would die.
Yeah, well, I'll move to approve the Assistant County Administrator position as described in our packet.
Could I get a second on that? Second by Lorraine. Okay, all those in favor? By, all those opposed? Okay, discussion?
I'm concerned that we're even talking about, I know we're swapping money for money here, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. For instance, if we vote a 12-month budget where we funded no vendors of the $3 million plus that we owe the nursing home, we're going to be asking every department to make significant cuts. Why wouldn't we put this on hold until we find out what we're going to do with the budget? Set this aside, and once we determine what kind of budget, if it's going to be a 6-month or a 12-month, at that point, we decide if we have this money to even spend. Because in fact, if we approve a 12-month budget, we'll be asking every department for very significant cuts because that 12-month budget doesn't include paying any vendor funds. So it would be significant to all departments. This will be very small change compared to what we'll have to cut. So I would support tabling this till we determine what our budget is. Thank you.
Pius?
This motion does not say anything about funding for it, just strictly approves the position as described. So this is not a funding issue here. In finance is where the funding takes place. However, if it's voted down here, automatically it's dropped to finance.
And then that was what I was suggesting, is that I'd support not supporting it until we had a budget. That was my comment, sir.
Okay, you want a discussion? Jack?
Yeah, for discussion, more of a question. As Mr. Morris is suggesting, I understand his logic and I appreciate it and I support it. My question is, I think these positions have already been evaluated. There's merit for them entering into or being filled eventually. And I would be supportive to support the position, but not the funding at a later point. And if all we're talking about tonight is the position and its existence without any funding, then I would be inclined to support it if that's what this vote would represent on the first motion on all this. I would support it, but I certainly would have a different opinion if it ever came out of finance to fund it. So I'll be supporting it for those purposes or reasons.
So my understanding is that these two positions, to support these two positions, will be budget neutral? Okay.
We're just voting on the positions themselves.
One at a time or both? Okay. So we go back to the original motion, which is to approve item number 3 as written without specifying a budget for that position? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Aye. Let me show by a raise of hands, all those in favor? All those, can we show those hands again, please? Up high? Great. One hand. Okay, all those opposed? Motion?
Passed 9-8.
Motion passes.
That's what I got.
Okay, could I get a motion to move item number 4, approval for HR specialist position as recommended by the Job Content Evaluation Committee?
So, second.
Moved by
Generalist positions.
McGuire, second by Keene. All those in favor? Aye. All those, discussion? Any discussion? Rick?
Just a clarification, it's HR generalist position. That's the actual title, just to make sure that's clear.
All those opposed? 1, 2. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. There are no other business to discuss. What was that? Number, what was that? Oh, yeah, that's not Part E. Resolution number 5092.
So the original, the first motion passed 9 to 8. You have 18 people in the room, somebody didn't vote. He was here. So you have 18 people. 9 votes with 18 people in the room, to me is that a passage? It's your decision. But I want to let you know that's where we're at. We're 9 to 8 to 1.
You sure he wasn't here? Wait, go ahead and say it in the microphone. Say this in the microphone. No reason why you can't.
So item 3 passed by our count 9 to 8 with 1 member not voting. We have 18 members in the room. I'm not sure 9 to 8 to 1 passes.
I would ask that we have a revote for that position, please. Mr. Rosales?
Could we get a roll call then for item number 3, please?
Harper. Hartke. King.
No.
Marsh.
No.
McGuire. Michaels. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
No.
Rector. Rosales.
Yes.
Summers. Anderson. Clemens. Coert. Esri.
No.
Goss.
No.
And Weibel.
Yes. We have 17. How did we get 18 before?
Motion passes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
9 to 8 in favor, now it's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
There's 9 noes.
I don't know.
We had 8 to 9.
So it failed.
It failed.
Okay.
9 votes no.
Correction, it failed.
Yes.
We had 1 member change their votes.
Go ahead, Mr. Patterson.
What was the tally for the hand raising earlier?
It was 1 ahead, 9 to 8 in favor. That feels to me like that vote.
Why? Yeah, my question is why did we take a second vote? There's 7.
Members, that 9 to 8 to 1 was not a proper count.
I would concur. We'll pass it on. Let's call it pass it on because it can always be voted again at the county board meeting. Everybody happy with that? We can do the same thing with a tie vote, so.
The first count was the one that's is sustained. Okay, the next one is Resolution 5092, Annual Trick or Treat Hours, Rules and Guidelines. Monday through Friday is from 6 to 8, and on weekends is from 5 to 7. But since October 31st lands on a Tuesday, this year trick-or-treating hours will be from 6 to 8. Okay. There are a couple vacancies. Up next, Zoning Board of Appeals, 1 vacancy, term 12/1/17 through 11/30/2022. Each member must be a resident of the separate township. Townships already represented are Urbana, St. Joe's, Sidney, Tolono, Scott, and South Homer. I guess we're missing Champaign, so that's 1 vacancy. Anybody that's interested, complete an application and submit it to the county. Item B, Public Aid Appeals Committee. There are 3 vacancies, 1 Republican and 2 Democrats. Term is from December 1st, 2017 through November 31st, 2019. Each member must be a township supervisor of general assistance. Submit your applications to the county. And designated items to be placed on the consent agenda, I believe is C3 and C4. What? A1? Okay, correction, A1, C3 and C4 will be addressed at the county board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosales. Yes, Ms. Michaels, question?
If I could back up here on the zoning board of appeals, it said each member must be a resident of a separate township. That's any township, not necessarily just Champaign, Urbana, whatever. There's multiple townships.
21
Right,
townships,
so
you're
any
correct.
of the 21 that are not listed.
The townships listed are not eligible.
Correct. Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosales. Let's move on to finance. Ms. Michaels. Ms. Petrie.
Chair Rosales, I'm not clear as to the standing of the alternative that the county administrator mentioned that he favored. Will this be brought up at the county board meeting?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Michaels? Oh, okay.
That item will be under finance at the county board meeting. Ms. Michaels, go ahead.
Okay, finance, we're going to start with the treasurer. I believe he has a report, and he certainly has his monthly reports that you can look up on the website. He has a cash flow projection for us.
My monthly report, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about real estate collections. Of course, this year we're collecting $332 million in real estate taxes. As of the end of work today, we were 98.92% collected, which is about a week ahead of where we normally are, but I sure like the sound of 99%. Our average over the last 20, 25 years, after the tax sale, we're usually around 99.96. So we're going to collect almost everything other than just bankruptcies. The last day for us to collect will be October the 19th, and the tax sale itself will occur in this room on October the 20th at 10:30 a.m. So I'd ask that I'd be glad to answer any questions about any of that, but also put my monthly report on file if you would please. I'll proceed. I'm not prepared today to give you a cash flow analysis, and that's because my office today experienced a computer virus, which resulted in my computer that I work on being removed in quarantine, so I didn't have a computer at all today. So I'm going to use the powers of my mind to remember all the numbers. And I've got all these years. I may confuse you or so. I think I can probably do it. The actual cash balance today for the nursing home was $500 after today's business. It's $528,000. Let's remember that includes $350,000 of loans that you've approved here, so it would leave an actual balance of about $178,000. The month of September was an interesting month in which the nursing home was able to pay a lot more on their bills to the tune of $669,000, when the previous 8 months average was closer to $530,000. Some things that contributed to that, of course, were the loans, of course, but they also got an IGT payment, which we've been experiencing. We hope to collect every quarter, and this quarter was $145,000. And then the fifth distribution of real estate tax money was made, which allowed us to pay off the tax anticipation warrants and still have $140,000 left over that goes towards their cash. So there were some good things, good positive things that allowed them to pay more on their bills than they had in the previous 8 months. Revenue lagged slightly behind. It was around $822,000, and the average for the last 8 months has been just a hair under $900,000. So I thought it was a positive month in the fact that it was the last 3 payroll month that we would have this year, and at no time, unlike many of the other months, were we overly concerned that we wouldn't make payroll. So those were all positives, I thought. Um, Yeah, I talked about the tax anticipation warrants. They've been paid off. I think, off the top of my head, we paid just a little bit under $9,000 in interest this year. I think the interest rate was 1.45% for $1,021,000 that we borrowed for them. And this was I believe the 8th year that we've done tax anticipation warrants. And we'll be prepared to put out an RFP in early November for the 9th year. Just as a reminder, 85% of their levy is what we're allowed to borrow on the tax anticipation warrants. Be glad to answer any questions about that if you have anything about the nursing home that I could remember.
Any questions for Mr. Welch, Ms. Petrie?
I have a couple of information questions, but first, I was at the nursing home board meeting, and it is impressive with the work that SAK has been able to do in such a short period of time. The question I actually wanted to ask at the nursing home board meeting, but when I attend those, I can't ask questions, so I'll ask you, and that is, many of the monies that they have been able to find and bring forth to help the finances of the nursing home, are these one-time situations, 50% of them one-time situations, or are these ongoing so that we can start thinking about long-term and what might be an upward curve on what is happening financially?
My opinion would be that the vast majority of them are one-time. And if you remember when SAK has made their presentations, they were talking about the initial thrust of their looking for this money was low-hanging fruit. And I think that's probably accurate. I'll say this about SAK. They've been very responsive, very, very responsive. When I've called them, one of the issues that we come up with on a pretty regular basis during the week is that we'll get money in, but we don't know what it is. And our first act is to let the nursing home know that we've received this money, be it into their bank account or into their Illinois funds, and could they identify that and let us get that into the system. And I think they've done a terrific job of identifying quickly, getting that money into the system. And it's made a big difference in our office because sometimes we get a week behind in the past where we were wondering, and there's $25,000 that was taken in, we don't know what it is. And there were some issues with passwords and things in the computer, but those things have been solved. And the people that I deal with on a pretty regular basis at SAK have been really outstanding to work with. Yep.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Welch? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the last thing I have, of course, is the resolution for the item, there's a piece of property, the Rantoul, that back in October, in 2014, they did not pay their real estate taxes. October of 2014, it goes to the tax sale. Nobody purchases the taxes. The redemption period of 2.5 years expires, and the county is then in possession of the deed, or the certificate, I should say. And then we have an auction every July. And this result of this auction was a $900 bid on this particular property. And what you're doing tonight is transferring the title out of our name and getting it into, out of the tax district's name and getting it into this individual's name. It's a very positive thing.
Any other questions? Then we'll go straight to the resolution. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'd move the resolution authorizing the deed of conveyance.
Yeah, I think I'd like to read the resolution, then we'll take your first and second, gentlemen. Resolution authorizing the county board chair to execute a deed of conveyance of the county's interest or authorize the cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase for real estate permanent parcel 20-09-02-181-017. Mr. Ezra and Mr. Hartke still first and second? Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving on next to the auditor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Farney is here. So we'll let him give a quick little update here. Once again, his monthly reports are also available for us to look at online.
You should have in your packet the monthly AP report from the nursing home, and I'm glad to entertain any questions you might have about that. Mr. Welch touched on a couple of items, the money that was coming in. The nursing home does continue. The month-to-month amount went down about $12,000 from September to October. The home does still owe the county close to $2 million, and that was actually a slight increase from September. Most of that increase was in IMRF and FICA, Social Security, that the county pays up front, and then they collect from the nursing home at the end of the year. As far as the vendors go, we still have 7 vendors that are over $100,000 owed by the nursing home. Just to let you know, there's also 2 other vendors that are very close to that. One was a vendor that was on the list last month. This month they dropped off, but they're at $97,000. The other is the new food service vendor who started in August, and they have yet to be paid, and they are up close to $71,000. That is within the credit terms with that vendor, by the way, with the food service vendor.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Farney in his report? Seeing none, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Farney. Next up, budget amendments and transfers. Have a budget transfer 17-00005 from Fund Department 090 Mental Health to 053 Mental Health Board in the amount of $50,000 for expenses incurred while understaffed. Have a motion from Mr. Rector, a second from Pies. Mr. Weibel, we have discussion, and we do have mental health here to discuss this. Ms. Petrie, did you have a question?
I'll wait for Lynn. This transfer that's being requested, is this a one-time transfer? We're not going to see it again?
Well, it's the result of a whole series of surprises. We are actually under-expended in personnel by about 83.5 by the end of the year, but we don't need that much. So on the other side, we've purchased some online systems. We've also needed to cover some of the HR functions that were also a surprise. I think that's in the memo.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that this wouldn't be an ongoing pattern.
I hope that we can do I hope that in the future, we'll be able to see major changes coming.
Okay,
and
thanks.
plan for them.
Any other questions for Ms. Canfield or anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. Okay, it passes. C1. Next up, budget amendment 17-00038, Fund Department 085, County Motor Fuel Tax to 060 Highway, an increased appropriation of $1,164,709, and none on the increased revenue because it is from the fund balance. The reason is to cover the cost of the Dewey Fisher construction project. $1,775,000 in appropriations were approved in Resolution 9028 on November 20, 2014. However, the invoice date was unknown to bill the county motor fuel tax funds at that time. The invoice was received in September of 17. Moved by Ms. Coert. Second by Mr. McGuire. Discussion, Mr. Weibel.
So was this document undated? Is that what caused the problem, apparently?
Yeah, it looks like we didn't get it on time from the
I
rest
guess
of
you
the
guys
participants in the
date the
group.
document.
Ms. Court, is that how you see that as the chair of highway, that they just didn't get it to us on time? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. King?
Yeah, so I'm assuming it didn't get paid in the budget period, but that money still carried over, so.
Correct. That was put into the budget to pay for that. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and that goes. And next up, we have Budget Amendment 17-00039 from Fund Department 089, County Public Health, to 018, CU Public Health District, an increase appropriate, well, it's revenue neutral of $24,363. And the reason was the property tax levy was split between the BOH and CU PhD, reversed trend in fiscal year 17, with the CU PhD experiencing greater growth in its levy due to an increase in the percentage of the estimated average value attributed to the areas within the district. The increase in the property tax revenue requires an increase in appropriations in order to distribute the funds to CU PhD. I need a motion. Mr. King first and a second. Mr. Summers. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. All opposed, no. Okay, we're in show of hands, you think? All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And opposed? Same sign. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that passes. So that will not be on consent. It does not pass. It fails. My fault.
What was it? Wait, you said
No.
it's 10.
Yeah, 10-6. Oh, excuse me. 10-6, it passes. 10-6. Sorry, my brain was in the other mode. I apologize. Yeah, who didn't vote? All right, it passes, guys. It will not be on consent, though. Next up is animal control. Request approval of an agreement between the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois and Champaign County Animal Control. And Ms. Jews is here. I need a move from Mr. Esri and a second from Mr. Goss. And we'll have discussion. She can give you a quick little explanation.
No, there we go. Good evening. I'm asking for your consideration in entering into a contract with the University of Illinois Vet Med to supplement our spay-neuter program. They currently have a mobile spay-neuter clinic where they take it all over the state and spay and neuter animals for shelters, for the public. And they approached us and asked if we would be interested in entering into this agreement with them to supplement our current program. We, our long-term vet of 10 years left us in July, and we now have a new veterinarian, and she's excellent. However, she's a new graduate, so she's a little bit slower than our previous vet. So we're not quite doing the numbers that we had been doing, but I do anticipate as she gets more comfortable and settled in that we will be able to get those numbers back up. But I feel like this program with the U of I is going to be very helpful for the community. It costs $25. They charge the county $25, which we then collect from the citizen, the pet owner. So it really doesn't affect our budget in any way in that we would continue to charge the same amount that the $40 for a cat, that includes the rabies tag, $40 for pit bulls, which also includes the $25 surgery and the $15 tag. And then for the low cost or the low income citizens, we still would follow our program where it's $65 for animals under 50 pounds and $90 for animals over 50 pounds. I don't want the U of I to be in competition with our current program, so we would continue to provide that service at 65 and 90. The U of I provides all of their own supplies, all of the labor, all the liability insurance. If there's anything that goes wrong with the surgery afterwards, they also handle any care required for the pet.
It was brought to my attention that you had maybe said $40 and your memo says $45, so it will be a $45 fee.
I'm sorry, $45.
I just want to
I
make sure.
apologize.
Nope, you're good. That's good. And we are covering our costs with that fee, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Petrie?
This sounds like a win-win, students and for you. Do you have a timeline that you think you'll need this extra set of hands, or do you want this to become a permanent relationship with the university?
I would like to see it become a permanent relationship. They are willing to come 2 weeks a month until the beginning of the year, and then after the beginning of the year, if everything is going well, they are willing to come every week and provide services.
Good.
We're talking 8 additional female dogs, up to 40 male cats at one time. So it could be a very, very, very impactful program for animal control.
Okay, I believe we need a motion for that, correct? So moved by Mr. Weibel, second by Mr. Geraldo Rivera, Mr. Geraldo Rosales. I've
There was
always said
already
that.
a motion.
I thought there was. Okay, I thought there was. Any other discussion? I'm a little lost. I'm waiting to see if we're having a boy or a girl, so I apologize. So, yeah, I know.
Her daughter.
Not me, the daughter. All those in favor of the approval of the agreement, please say aye. Aye. Any of those opposed, say no. Okay, and now we're up to the recorder. He has a request of an approval of an increase to the recording and plat fees that would be effective January of 18. I need a motion for that. Mr. Weibel, and second? Mr. Harpke. There we go. Okay. Okay, you're next.
The memo's here. I hope it explains everything. The Public Act was just signed to create what are called predictable recording fees to eliminate the extra page charge. The net effect of this is anticipated to be 0. So if we went back 3 years and if we had done this for the last 3 years, our revenue at the county would be the same. So looking forward, of course, we never know how many documents are going to be recorded, but the intended result of this is essentially what's going to happen is deeds, mortgage releases would go up in price by $3. A mortgage itself would go down. Right now it would usually cost you about 70 some dollars, and now it'll go down to 61. So on balance, it's even.
Do we have any questions for the recorder concerning the resolution? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That passes. Okay, next up, the administrator, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to defer to Ms. Ogden to review items 1 and 2, which are the general fund budget projection report and budget change report.
There is no significant change in the revenue projections for fiscal year 2017. However, I want to bring to your attention 2 pieces of information. One is that the county did receive 2 income tax disbursements in September, so the Department of Revenue is proceeding with the advanced disbursement for income tax according to the state legislature's directions. The other thing is that we did learn recently that the Illinois Department of Revenue will not seek to recapture the misallocated personal property replacement tax funds that were received by the county in fiscal years 2014 and 2015. That was about $120,000, so we will not have to pay that money back to the state. On the expenditure side, we continue to project some savings. Really what I want to focus on is the fund balance report. You can see that there has been some improvement to the revenue to expenditure difference from last month. Last month we were projecting about a negative $374,000 difference. This month is about $350,000 revenue to expenditure deficit. However, you will notice that as the percentage of the expenditure budget, was decreased from 11.7% to 11.5%. This is a result of the adjustment to the fund balance that I made on the report this month. If you recall, when we had the legislative budget hearings, I indicated that I had discovered some discrepancies in the fund balance report that was maintained by administrative services. And this was not just for the general fund. There were some other funds that were impacted by the differences. So what I have done is gone back for the general fund to research where this discrepancy occurred. And from what I can tell, it occurred in fiscal year 2011. The fund balance spreadsheet is an Excel spreadsheet that's manually maintained by administrative services, and there was a formula error in one of the cells that resulted in about $112,000 discrepancy. So I have adjusted this fund balance number to 4.478 million. I've also verified with the auditor's office that this is the number that they maintained in their fund balances, and that is what is resulting in the decrease in the percentage of expenditure budget from 11.7% to 11.5%. One thing that I will point out is that Ms. Blakeman mentioned earlier that the county will be the recipient of some of the revenue that was received from the amnesty program. That's not reflected in this report. So depending on what that number is, I do anticipate that this number will improve once those revenues are posted and accounted for by the county.
Thank you. Do you believe we'll get those funds in 17 or 18?
My understanding is that we will get those funds this year.
Okay. Anybody have questions, Mr. Weibel?
Yeah, just thank you very much for the report. One comment is I noticed on the hard copies, it's very hard to read the material. It's got the back on the gray. If you could look into that, perhaps try to correct
Thank
that
you.
next time.
Yes, I made a note of that today when I was looking at the packet that I need to adjust that color.
Right. Any other questions for Ms. Ogden, Ms. Petrie?
Good detective work. Do we have in place now so this won't happen again? That was 5 to 6 years, so.
So what I have done for the fiscal year 2018 budget is reformatted the fund balance spreadsheet. It's much cleaner and easier to read. It's 2 pages instead of multiple pages. Moving forward, what I think part of the problem is that not only was this a very manual process, but there was also the process of using the AS400 to go in and enter revenues and expenditures, and perhaps there could have been adjustments that maybe weren't captured, that then there wasn't an adjustment made in the future. So what I propose that the county do moving forward is that after the fund balance spreadsheet is prepared, or if the auditor's report is available prior to that, that there be an effort to go back and ensure that those numbers are matching the auditor's report. And the comprehensive annual financial report, actually, on the budget basis is what I think we need to tie to.
Mr.
And
King.
an ERP system, too.
Okay, yeah. And Mr. King?
Yeah. So Tammy, I was just going to ask a question. So you mentioned that the auditors had I guess the $4 million for that dollar amount that you listed there. Was that prior to you noticing the discrepancy? Were there discrepancies in your report versus their report prior to that, or because it just feels like you discovered it, but I didn't know if that was something that had already been known by the auditor?
Well, it's not an auditor error.
Okay.
It's an administrative services error. This is something that last year during the budget process, I noticed that there were some deviations, but being the first year that I had done the budget, didn't really have time to delve into and research, where those discrepancies were coming from. This year I did have the opportunity to do that. I have not gone back to every single fund to try to determine where the discrepancies are, but I have some of the larger funds, and I can tell you that many of them were occurred in fiscal year 2011. So, those, when I found the errors, they were a result of generally there being a formula error or a hard number entered into a cell rather than a formula.
Okay. And then I guess my follow-up was, so do the auditors use, I don't know if you could speak to this, a spreadsheet as well, or are you all operating?
Mr.
The
Barnes
auditor is here.
Yeah.
The auditor's information comes directly from the AS400 and is the official numbers for the county. The information that Ms. Ogden is using is a separate thing used only by administrative services for their information only and for your information. But as far as anything official, the AS400 is correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Ogden? Thank you. Good work. And next, we have a request, the approval of the Assistant County Administrator position is recommended by the Job Content Evaluation Committee.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve and a second. Motion by Mr. Weibel, Mr. Rosales. Any other discussion? This is in the finance area. Mr. Weibel?
I will not be supporting this. I think that is something we should work on later on and deal with it then. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Mr. McGuire?
In short, we vote no because we don't want to spend the money, right?
That's what I believe Mr. Weibel was referring to. Anybody else?
May I respond?
Yes,
Actually,
please.
it has nothing to do with the money. No, I just don't think this is the time to do it. I think we should wait till we're closer to, this is something the county executive should work with.
Okay, does everybody understand? Then, any other discussion about the item? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Okay. And then F4 is request approval of HR generalist position as recommended by the Job Content Evaluation Committee. Need a motion on that? Ms. Petrie and Mr. Summers, and we have discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Okay. And then recommendation to county board to receive and place on file the fiscal year 2018 tentative budget. Okay, there you go. So move Ms. Petrie. Mr. Goss, any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Okay. Okay. Next up is the nursing home. Approval of proposed Champaign County Nursing Home Subdivision Plat and Owner's Certificate and authorization of City of Urbana application for minor plat and City of Urbana application for a waiver of subdivision regulations. Who moved down there? Oh, Mr. McGuire, and second, Mr. Anderson. Discussion. Any discussion? Okay, yeah. And Mr. Hall is here if somebody has a question. Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. And number 2, approval to release request for proposals for the purchase of the Champaign County Nursing Home. Got a motion from Mr. Rector and a second from Mr. Goss. Discussion.
I would ask for a roll call, ma'am.
Certainly. Can we see if there's discussion first, sir? Do you mind? Okey doke. Okay. Anybody have any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Petrie, I'm sorry.
Well, I will be supporting this, and the reason for supporting it is we have no idea whether there are possibilities on the nursing home, and I look at it as if I want to decide to sell my house, I've got to find out if there's a market for it, and there was indication by the voters that we at least should explore what are the possibilities. There may be no market. We have no idea. We've talked and talked and talked and talked about this without any definitive information. So for that reason, supporting it. Doing so doesn't mean we sell it. It just gives us information.
Mr. King?
And this may just be a question. Rick, is it possible to get a market analysis without an RFP? I mean, could you get a blanket analysis without having to go through formalized proposal structure?
We have an estimated value or minimum bid level for the home if it's marketed. It's somewhat of a prospective analysis. One of the challenges has been that the past year has not been representative of previous years of operations. So the broker has proposed using local averages for various costs related to the operation of the home to provide an estimated return on investment for a prospective bidder. So that's the analysis that's been done so far.
Mr. Anderson?
I'm going to support this, and I wanted to point out that I agree with Ms. Petrie. I want to find out if it's sellable. We're not just offering up a piece of land or a building, but it has covenants attached to it. And we want to see what the market's response to that is as well. Thank you.
Any other discussion? And Mr. Hartke has asked for a roll call, Madam.
Harper,
Yes.
Hartke,
No.
King,
No.
Marsh,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Michaels. Patterson,
No.
Petrie,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales,
No.
Summers, Weibel, Anderson, Clemens, Cowart, Esri,
Yes.
and Goss.
Yes.
I have 10-7, ma'am.
Correct.
10-7 on the yeses. Okay, I do not have any other business.
Ms. Michaels?
Yes, sir.
This might be a top tree if either Mr. Ezra or Ms. Petrie want to propose the additional funding for planning and zoning. This would be the time to do it.
Okay,
I think just make a motion, direct the administrator to do such. So
okay.
In other words, a motion to bring it up, or a full motion. Okay, well, I would move to direct Mr. Snyder to bring forward at the full county board next week. I don't have the date in front of me, but to bring forward the numbers and the position of converting the part-time person in planning and zoning to a full-time position, which was presented as the alternative originally.
Okay, and a second? Okay, second. Mr. Harper, we'll give that to him. Okay, discussion. And as I see that, this is just directing Mr. Snyder to put together some numbers and some more information on that possibility. So any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Okay, so I don't have a report. And I believe on consent will be A3, C1, C2, D1, E1, F3, F4, and on the other business, the item that was just brought up.
F3 did not pass.
F3
failed.
failed? I'm sorry.
And,
Somehow I had that.
I would ask that F4 be put on.
So put 3 and 4 on the regular full
Well-
agenda?
F3 failed,
Right.
but I'd like to have F4 on the regular agenda.
Okay, one person
All right.
talk at a time. I can't hear both of y'all.
Me first?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have F4 on the regular agenda.
Okay, and that's fine. Let's do that. Does anybody else have any problem with putting F4 on the agenda?
Actually, it just takes one to request it.
Okay. Yes. Mr.
I have a-
McGuire?
I have a question about F3 because I understand there's a complaint about it being on the agenda or not on the agenda based on the votes, but there was some problem with the clarity of the first vote, and so there was a roll call vote, and someone asked for the roll call vote, and that vote was I guess it was no, okay.
Yeah. Does that work? Okay. It's up to you, sir. Oh, still? Yeah, we're done. Designated items and the other business item goes on the consent.
Is there any other business for tonight? Seeing none, we're
Mr.
adjourned.
Chair,
Nope.
it's, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I just want to make sure the county board's aware that we will be having a truth and taxation hearing on October 19th prior to the county board meeting.
Well, I assume we'll have that at 6:30 though? We won't,
6.
we have to have it at 6?
It's already scheduled for 6.
Bah humbug.
Correct.
Okay. All right, think about that when you schedule your caucuses. You can reschedule them if you do it, in the proper time.